Well, good morning, New Hope. So you're saying the worship guy's up here giving the message. No, it's okay. See, it's just going to be like a song. It's just without a melody. It's extended worship. See, we're still in worship time, amen? Yeah. So it's kind of fitting that I'm up here doing this because we've been going through this series called Doors, and we've been looking at this struggle between going from immaturity and trying to maturity and training. And, you know, one of the guys that's in the Bible that I love talking about is Timothy. Timothy is a guy who was trained up. He was kind of an apprentice pastor that was trained by the Apostle Paul. Paul was a great preacher. He was one of the greatest pastors, if you would, ever. I mean, he was better than Billy Graham was. He was even better than Pastor Mike Score. My name's Jason. I'm your friend. So, anyway, I'd like to think that just like Timothy, you know, I'm kind of on this path of constantly being in training. Now, if you'd ask my wife, my kids, and now Pastor Mike, they'd probably just say, well, Jason, you're just flat out immature. So anyway, so it's fitting that I'm up here, but in any case, we're talking about as we get to this Thanksgiving time, and this is the time where churches all across the country, they're talking about being thankful and Thanksgiving. And why are you thankful? Well, that's all fine and dandy, but how do you learn how to be thankful? How can you say that I'm thankful for something if you don't understand what gratitude is? And gratitude is just the heart of everything about being thankful. So that's what we're going to discuss this morning is just gratitude, being truly thankful, and how do we accomplish that? And I can remember back whenever I was a youngster that I had a good friend named Michael Walker. Michael Walker lived next door to me, and man, his whole family was just all about basketball. His father was a great basketball coach. His older brother, Eddie Walker, man, he set like every single possible score or record in the state of Tennessee for basketball. He was just awesome. And his younger brother, Michael Walker, I mean, he's like this tall to me. He's like knee-high to a grasshopper. That's Tennessee talk, y'all, all right? But he's a short dude, but he could play basketball. I mean, he just fast, dribbling up and down the court. I mean, he could take three-pointers, two-pointers, everything else. I mean, he was just awesome. And I knew it was because of one thing. Skill? No. It was because of his shoes. He had these shoes that were awesome. They were Air Jordans, and back then Air Jordans weren't widely, you know, they didn't have the long-term popularity they have now. They were relatively new, but they were cool. They were awesome shoes, and I wanted these shoes. They were black and red. I think we got a picture of them. These were, oh, man, that was the Cadillac of shoes. I think they got a different term for them now. They don't call them shoes anymore. I got to be hip now. What are these kicks? That's what they are, yeah. So these were the kicks that I wanted to wear because I just knew if I had those shoes, I could run faster. I could look good. I could shoot baskets. I could even slam dunk. I know some of you are picturing that right now going, yeah, fat boy slam dunk. I want to see that happen. But I knew if I had those shoes, I could do it. I could do it. I could be Michael Jordan. So I finally got the shoes. I was still horrible at basketball. Some of you are going, yeah, I can imagine that. But see, that's why I'm better behind a guitar than I am behind a basketball or a golf club, because I'm just not the athlete. Hard to imagine, huh? My physical stature. Yeah. I'm just not the athlete. But why do we do that? You see, I don't even remember what happened to those Air Jordans. I honestly don't. Chances are I just went on to whatever the next thing was that I wanted in my life. But we all tend to do that, don't we? You know, it doesn't matter if it's stuff or if it's money, because it's all stuff. If it's money in our life, you know, we want to attain this level of whatever of stature. And then once we attain that level, what do? We want the next level. We say, okay, I want to get this much in the savings account. Then we want this much in the savings account. Or if the level of rich in my life is this, then it's this. We always want more stuff. Why? Because we're basing our levels on stuff. You know, the writers of the Bible, they talked about how we have this need to fill our soul with things. The Hebrew word for soul is a word called nephesh. Nephesh, you'll find that in your note-taking guide. By the way, if you've got your note-taking guides, that's great. That's there inside of your worship folder too. But also, if you've got a smartphone, things like that, feel free to get that out. We've got a free app that we've partnered up with YouVersion where you can download the Bible for free. You can go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Colossians. We'll meet you there in a minute. If you've got a hard copy of a Bible, man, that's great. It's in the New Testament, about halfway through, turn to the back. It's right after Philippians. If you've got an app that's called Bible, then Colossians, you find it by hitting the button called Colossians. And it's right there, so it's real cool. So if you don't have a Bible, we want to encourage you. We don't want anyone to not have a Bible. So right outside these doors, there are racks that say free Bibles, and we really mean that. If you don't own a Bible, take one after you leave here. It's yours to keep. We sincerely mean that. But in the Bible, the Hebrew word for soul was nephesh. Nephesh. And it literally meant soul. And a lot of times, whenever the Bible's being translated and the word nephesh was there in the translations, it would get translated to mean stomach, mouth, throat. Why? Because it was constantly being talked about being fed, the soul being fed. So what more appropriate to talk about the stomach, the mouth, the throat being fed, feeding your soul. Well, if you're a guy like me, you're going to have to feed me a lot. And that's how we are. We constantly want to eat. We constantly want our souls to be fed. Well, if we're placing our value in stuff, we're never going to get fed enough. What we need to do in turn is to find out where our immaturity lies. And our immaturity lies with placing our value in stuff. You see, immaturity comes in placing value in things instead of seeing the value in the provider and the owner of all things. You'll find that there on your screen. You can fill that in your note-taking guide. Immaturity comes with placing value in things instead of seeing the value in the provider and the owner of all things. God owns it all anyway, right? I've got an Uncle John that would tell me all the time, he'd say, Jason, I've got a car. I don't own it. God owns it. I get to drive it. I've got a home. I don't own it. God owns it. I just get to live in it. And when you think about things that way, stuff doesn't matter. You can accumulate all the stuff you want to, but God's the one that owns it. It all belongs to God. And we're going to talk about that. That's gratitude. That's thanksgiving. Let's turn into Colossians. Colossians 3, verse 15. You'll find it up on the screen too as well. It says, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Since as members of one body, you were called to peace. And what does it say? And be thankful. Be thankful. Well, you hear about thankful all the time in the Bible. There's all kinds of verses about being thankful. Well, let's think about this for a minute. This is Paul writing a letter to the Colossians. The Colossians, mind you, are a group of people just like you sitting in this room, members of the church, the people of the church. And he's telling them to be thankful. Mind you, he's saying this while he's in prison at Caesarea. And he's telling a body of believers to be thankful. We need to be reminded from time to time to be thankful. And not just something vague, something just to say, hey, be thankful, but why we need to be thankful. See, gratitude doesn't come from acquiring more things or experiences, but gratitude comes from awareness of his goodness and his presence. Let me say that again. Gratitude doesn't come from acquiring more things or experiences, but from awareness of his goodness and presence. Gratitude's a byproduct of that goodness and presence. Goodness, good, stemming from the Latin word bene. Bene just means good. And I think for us to find gratitude, there's always going to be three goods that are involved. The first bene, the first good, is benefit. Benefit. To be grateful, you've got to be able to receive a good and know that it's good. You've got to be able to receive a gift and know that it's good. How many of you have kids, son, daughter, and they bring you this piece of paper or whatever, it's got a drawing on it, crayon drawing, watercolor, paint, something else, or a whatever in the world this is. But sweetheart, it looks nice. But you get this, and what art collector would look at this and go, that is amazing work. I think I will hang that up in my gallery. I must have it. No one. What highest bidder would look at that and say, oh, I'm going to, at the auction, I'm going to be the highest bidder on that? Said no one ever. But you as parents, you look at that and you say, I'm making a spot right there on the refrigerator because that is good. Now, do you look at that and realistically in your head go, that's a mess of garbage? Okay, some of you are laughing. We'll get your kids some art instructions. Okay. No, but seriously, you look at it and you say, that's good. Why? Because of the heart of the one that gave it to you is good. And you know that that's a good gift worthy of being placed on your refrigerator. It's good. You have to know that the gift that you're receiving is good. I can remember back February a few years ago and cold in Atlanta. And man, I realize now being up here a year, cold in Atlanta, Georgia is totally different from being cold up here. But still, being in Atlanta, Georgia, whenever a song that was number one for quite a few years now, we even sing it here, called 10,000 Reasons, being privileged to be a part of that live recording that was done. And it stemmed off of Psalm 103. Psalm 103 says, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that's within me. Bless his holy name. But we rarely sing or speak about the verse that comes next. It says, bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not his benefits. You've got to see the benefits. You see, I brought up this whole deal about kids and artwork on a refrigerator because I want us to understand that value, that concept of being childlike and seeing the good there. Because you see, when we're young in our faith and we're kind of new to this thing of seeing God and his goodness, it's easy for us to see and thank God for everything. Because, man, we're on fire about it. We're seeing God's greatness and God's goodness and everything and telling him thank you. But as we get older, as we kind of go along and go along in our faith, it's not that God's no longer good. We say it all the time. God is good. And all the time. Okay, you say it, but do you see it? Do you constantly acknowledge it? You woke up this morning, you had breath in 2 lungs. You've heard me say that before. Did you acknowledge it when you got up? Why? It's because of one word that, as we're talking about immaturity, when it comes to gratitude, one word that kills us every time is this. Complacency. We get complacent. Along with being complacent, sometimes I think there's also an expectation. Sometimes we expect it. Sometimes we're just so complacent that we just don't even see it. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with expecting. Because you see, I can expect that my God is sovereign and above all things and that he knows everything. I can expect that my God sees my needs and he'll see me through it. And it's true. But that doesn't mean that I'm so complacent that I'm not in utter awe whenever he does it for me, day in and day out. My family and I, we moved back into Tennessee in September of 2007 in Nashville. And I was only working part of my time doing worship. My wife was working on staff at the local church there in Nashville. And I was spending the majority of my time working full-time at we'll just describe it as a major computer manufacturer. Is not to throw anyone under the bus. I was working there at a major computer manufacturer. I was a senior analyst for this company. And things were looking good. We had just found a house that we loved in a community, a neighborhood that we really loved. And we're just closing on the house. Life was good. It was a Thursday, and I'm there with the worship team, and we're rehearsing a song by Mercy Me called Bring the Rain. It's a great song. And it goes, I can count 1,000,000 times people asking me how I can praise you with all that you've gone through. The question just amazes me. Can circumstances possibly change who I forever am in you? And it goes on to say, bring me joy, bring me peace. I know there'll be days when this life brings me pain, but if that's what it takes to praise you, Jesus brings the rain. Jesus, bring the rain. Great song. Be careful what you sing. You guys sang with me last week a song that says, go ahead and shake my foundation. How many of you sang that and said, go ahead and shake my foundation? Because you know you do it, he's liable to do it. Don't challenge him. I sang that song, and that was on a Thursday. We're rehearsing it. Could you imagine that this particular computer manufacturer decided to lay off about 300 people in my division? Can you guess what ended up happening with my job? We had just closed on a house. Life was good. Thursday, we rehearsed the song. Sunday, I'm on stage having just lost my job on a Friday. And there I am singing. And I know there'll be days when this life gives me pain. But if that's what it takes to praise you, Jesus, bring the rain. I sang that song one other time in my life. Very next weekend, my mom passed away. You wonder why I don't sing it on this stage? My wife is over there cringing right now, going, boy, don't you dare sing another line. A year and a half, I was without a job. A year and a half. I did every odd job that I could possibly find to be able to struggle to make money for our family while my wife was doing everything that she could too as well. And it was rough. I was installing satellite TV for a buddy that was in a small group with me that just happened to do that as his living. Say, hey, would you want to come alongside me? Let me just throw you some money out of what I make. Sure, I'll do that. I worked for a funeral home. I was cremating. I worked as a bounty hunter doing fugitive recovery. Someone out there is just trying to picture me in a mullet right now, looking like Dog the Bounty Hunter. No, but I did whatever it took. And I can tell you this much. Everything that we got, every single shred of money that we were able to make, we tithed on. And it ultimately led me to be able to get the job. You guys have heard Pastor Mike, whenever I first got here, talked about me being on TNA Wrestling, playing a character called Jason Gentry. That's what ultimately led me to that, was throwing T-shirts in a bag for $10 an hour, led me to that job. But for a year and a half, no steady job. And for a year and a half, we never lost our house. For a year and a half, we never had to worry about putting food on a table. For a year and a half, we never worried about utilities. Let me just tell you, that was God trying to make a point to me to say, Jason, you've made a paycheck all of your life. I've been the one providing. I've been the one providing. How do you say thank you to that? How do you say thank you in that situation? Let me tell you, you say thank you when you're eating ramen noodles. You say thank you, God, for the provision. I'm serious. How do you say thank you when you're not going out to fancy restaurants and Instagramming your perfect meal? You say thank you whenever you've got all of your family around the table eating peanut butter and jelly or whatever it is that you're making. You say thank you. My family still does that to this day. We still sit around the table together, and we take those moments to be able to say thank you. And we begin by saying, God, thank you for your provisions. Even if we're a family of Southerners that don't like the freezing cold, and we'd rather be on a beach somewhere, we still thank God for the provisions and the opportunities to be here. We thank God. Luke 17 tells us a story of people who received a blessing from Jesus. Luke 17, 11 through 19 says, Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. And as he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. And when he saw them, he said, Go and show yourselves to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw that he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? As no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner, then he said to them, Rise and go. Your faith has made you well. I don't know about you. I don't ever want to be like the 9 that got their blessings and then trucked right along. I want to always be like that one that got his blessing and then stopped, turned around and said, Thank you every step of the way. There's a story that's in a second helping of Chicken Soup for the Soul. It talks about a pastor that was at a church that would constantly get flowers for the pulpit in different areas. And one particular family would always make sure that he had a boutonniere for his suit. And he'd wear this boutonniere every single Sunday. And every Sunday after he was done, he'd take it off, throw it away, and go on about his meal or whatever. And until one Sunday, this boy walked up to him and he said, Hey, Pastor, do you mind? I don't know what you're doing with the boutonniere. What are you going to do with that? He said, Why? What do you want? Do you need it? He said, Well, I'd kind of like to have it if you don't mind. I mean, that is if you're just going to throw it away. I'd love to have it. He said, Well, what are you going to do with it? He said, I love it for my grandmother. You see, my mom and dad, they divorced last year. And I was living with my mom, and my mom remarried. So I had to go live with my dad. My dad's an alcoholic, and it wasn't a good situation, so I had to go live with my grandmother. Man, my grandmother loves me to death. My grandmother, she cooks for me. She takes care of me. And I tell her thank you all the time, but I don't know how to say thank you. I just know if you're going to give that to your wife, then by all means. But if you're just going to throw it away, I'd love to give it to my grandmother so she'd know. I know if she sees it, she'll know how much I love her. Well, that rattled that pastor. And he thought for a minute, and he said, Son, I'm sorry, but you can't have this. And the little boy said, That's okay, thank you. He said, No, you can't have this because it's not enough. See, right in front of the pulpit, there's some fresh flowers that every week families bring, and they bring this whole bouquet. You take that to your grandmother because she deserves that and tons more. And the boy said, Wow, thank you so much. I came here not expecting anything, but I saw that flower and I thought maybe I could have one flower, and I got so much more than I deserve. I want his attitude. I want to have his attitude to always be getting more than what I deserve, and just see that I've got more than I deserve to have. See, we need to see the benefit. That's a thankful spirit. Number 2, we need to have a benefactor. A benefactor. Literally, factor, bene means good, and factor, just being short for factory, meaning one who does good. I mean, literally, a factory who does good. In order to understand, in order for you to be truly thankful, you've got to understand that the good that you have comes from someone that has good intentions for you, not someone who's trying to mislead you or just dangle a carrot in front of you. We talked about what my Uncle John says about everything belongs to God. Listen to this in James 1, verse 17. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. Every good and perfect gift is from above. When you don't place your value in stuff, when instead you place your value in the God who gives all, it's a change of perspective. And you can start growing from immaturity and complacency into maturity, gratitude, thanksgiving. Third, you need a beneficiary. A beneficiary. That's the one who receives the good gift of God. And that's primarily you. There's a couple other beneficiaries we're going to talk about in just a moment. But let's talk about you for a minute. We don't fully see this about receiving this gift because we've got a sense of entitlement, don't we? I know I did. When it came to those Air Jordans, I was entitled to those things. I deserved those Air Jordans. And you know what? How horrible I am. I couldn't even tell you to this day how I got those Air Jordans. Honestly. Why? Because, man, there was greed that I had, wasn't there? Because it was all about stuff. No thankfulness. I had to have a huge change in perspective along life. I started reading 1 Thessalonians 5:18, and it developed my prayer life and developed my life of thankfulness. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 is where it talks about praying without ceasing in all circumstances. Give thanks in all circumstances. You know, when you do that, it's hard to have a bad day. You guys have heard me. If you've been around New Hope for any length of time, you've heard me say over and over before, we woke up with breath in two lungs that we don't deserve to have. You need to exhale that and do something mighty with it. That's not something that's native to me. It's something that I heard from a good friend of mine named Seth Hood. Seth Hood, up until recently, was a missionary pastor over in Bangkok, Thailand. And he said that one time, and man, it stuck with me. And I woke up one morning, and as I began to take my first breath that I acknowledged that I was having, I thanked God for that breath. I thought, man, that was pretty good. Gave me a whole different perspective. And I realized, man, I've got attitudes in other areas. I can have good positive attitudes in this area, but man, get me behind the wheel of a car and I turn into instant. And I did pretty well until I came to Williston and I drove here. Some of you are still there. I know, I see you driving. No, anyway, so I had to figure out how do I turn this thankfulness of things, how can I do that about my driving? And I thought, I'm going to spend the first 30 minutes of my day thanking God for every single thing. That's what I'm literally going to do. I'm going to thank God for everything. So it turned into me literally driving around going, God, I thank you for this vehicle. I thank you for the reliable transportation that I've got. I thank you for the ability that I don't have to walk to work, that I can drive when I know that people in other countries don't. They can't. God, I thank you for reliable roads. And I got here and I said, somewhat. So I said, God, I thank you for the ability just to be able to drive from point A to point B. God, I thank you for air conditioning. I thank you for heat. God, I thank you for cruise control. I thank you for turn signals. I thank you that the guy ahead of me is going to one day learn how to use his turn signal. So, no, it's not something that you get right away, but if you start thanking God for everything, it changes your whole day in front of you. And I know what some of you are thinking. Some of you are thinking, Pastor Jason, if you saw the car that I'm driving, you'd understand why I can't be thankful for it. I'm going to call you out on it right now. I'm serious. If you're driving a car, I don't care if the engine's knocking, be thankful for it. Some of you say, if Pastor Jason, if you were to go to my job and understand the difficult people that I'm dealing with, or the roughness of the job that I have each and every day, you'd understand why I can't be thankful for it. Let me read you some statistics. Just remember, my name's Jason. I'm Pastor Mike's friend. By default, that makes me your friend. Have you got $2,200? I didn't say $22,000, $2,200. If you have $2,200 in this world, you're rich. Assets of $2,200 per adult place a person in the top 50% of the world's wealthiest. If you made $1,500, $1,500 last year, some of your kids make that, you're in the top 20% of the world's income earners. If you've got sufficient food, decent clothes, live in a house or an apartment, and you've got reasonably reliable means of transportation, that means you're among the top 15% of the world's wealthy. You have $61,000 in assets, you're among the world's richest 10%. If you earn $25,000 or more annually, you're in the top 10% of the world's income earners. If you've got any money saved, I don't care if it's 50 cents, if you've got any money saved, a hobby that requires some equipment or supplies, a variety of clothes in your closet, 2 cars in any condition, even if they're up on blocks, and you live in your own home, you're in the top 5% of the world's wealthy. If you earn more than $50,000 annually, you're in the top 1% of the world's income earners. If you earn more than $500,000 in assets, you're part of the richest 1% of the world. You know, if you sit at your Thanksgiving table this Thursday and all you can thank God for is a bird and some stuffing, you've got things around you all the time to be thankful for. Why don't we do it? My name's Jason. I'm still your friend. I just might not get invited to your Thanksgiving dinner. But you see, it hits me too. I get complacent on a daily basis. I realized it when I was reading something just a few weeks ago. I'm reading something and I'm realizing that, you know what, when I go to somebody else's house, if you invite me over to your house and you make a meal for me or for my family, what am I going to do whenever the meal's done? Chances are I'm going to say, thank you for this. Now, I don't know if that's just a Southern thing for Southern hospitality, for me to say that, or if that's just something that's just globally accepted. I'd like to think that that's how we do things, that we'd say thank you. And I would do that. My own wife, who knows everything, how picky I am about what I eat, who goes even further than that, knows everything about what my kids like to eat and don't like to eat and how they like it prepared and how I like it prepared, I don't say thank you to her. Why? Complacency. So I started doing it. I started saying thank you for meals. And it was weird at first. So she's like, I'm like, thank you, honey, for the meal. She's like, what do you want? And then I explained it to her. I said, no, honey, I do this over here with other people. Why don't I do it for you? It's not right. She understood it. And she appreciated it. See, when I'm thankful for my spouse, that control that the familiarity of contempt has is destroyed completely. And I start looking for things that are in her routine that I've taken for granted, that I've been complacent on, that I've had an expectation of, and I've started to show gratitude. And it changes things. There's one final area of contempt that we need to think about. One final area that we need to turn to of gratitude. See, we're not the only beneficiaries. There's 2 other groups of beneficiaries. There's other believers that are around us, other people that are supposed to be encouraging us, and we're supposed to be encouraging them. You see, back to Paul. Paul, who wrote many of the books in the New Testament, and most of these are letters to other believers. They're letters to other churches. He began these by saying, I thank God for you. Now, I'm going to go through some of these quickly. You don't have to turn to them. They're not going to be up on the screen. But let's just go through these quickly. 1 Thessalonians 1, verse 2 says, we always thank God for all of you. Philippians 1, verse 3 says, I thank my God every time I remember you. 1 Corinthians 1, verse 4 says, I always thank my God for you. And you're thinking, well, that's fitting. You've said that Paul is basically a pastor, and it's fitting that he would be appreciative of people in the churches, right? Okay. Let's look at what some of the things that were going on in the church was, and let's see how thankful you'd be. Verse 11, he goes on and says, my brothers and sisters, some from Chloe's household have informed me that there are quarrels among you. These were argumentative people. These people were naggers. They were just nagging, nitpicking. You see, they're argumentative folk. Verse 26 said that they were unlearned and simple people. Chapter 3, verse 1 through 3 said that they were worldly infants. Chapter 4, verse 18 said they were arrogant egocentrics. Chapter 5, verse 1, I won't even go to details. It was a man that was doing some very inappropriate things with one of his relatives. Chapter 6, verse 1 said that amongst them there were greedy men suing fellow believers. And then chapter 14, verse 20 said that there were childish thinkers. Why would he thank God for them? This is a man who knew all of their faults. If he knows their faults so well, why would he thank God for them? Well, it's because of what comes after in that verse in 1 Corinthians. Why don't we look at that on the screen? 1 Corinthians 1, verse 4. He still honors them. He says, I always thank God for you because of what? Because of his grace given to you in Christ Jesus. He thanks God not because of anything other than the value in him by his grace. You see, how many of you, me included, would an art collector look at our lives and say, oh, I want to hang that up in my gallery? How many of you have lives that the highest bidder would say, oh, I want that? Let me bid on you. But let me make one solid promise to you, is that our God places so much value in you that he gave his son for us, that he sees you and loves you and sees you as his masterpieces enough that he would run to his fridge, clear off everything on it, and hang you up as a masterpiece. And that is the truth. I thank God for you because of his grace given through Jesus Christ. There's one other reason, one other beneficiary, and that's others. Mark 16, verse 15 is called the Great Commission. It's one of the great verses in the Bible because it's called the Great Commission. And it's one of the places that sadly we get the most complacent about. You see, it says in Mark 16, verse 15, he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. And that word go catches a lot of us. Now, I hear some people that will say, Pastor Jason, I can't afford to go on a mission trip to Bosnia or someplace like that. I went 2 years ago and I went on a mission trip so-and-so. Well, notice the verse doesn't say stop and go. It says go. It's one of the core values that we have here at New Hope. Go, grow, and give. You want to guess what go is? Go into all the world. And go means basically this. We look at go, and we need to look at it through a different lens. You see, if you look at the translation, if you look at what the intent is of go, it's not go, just go overseas somewhere. It's go as you are going. So when you see that verse, think go as you are going. As you are going through your daily life. As you are going to your job. As you are going out the doors of this church, the mission field starts. You look out the license plates in this place as you leave. It's not just going into all the world. The world's coming to Williston. As you are going, preach the gospel. And yet we've got people that we write down in our Bible say, I want to pray for an opportunity. Find the opportunity. Don't get complacent. Go into the world. And as you are going, preach the gospel. I can't think of any single more powerful way to thank God and to say thank you to him for the goodness that he's done for me and by sharing that gift with somebody else. In the final moments that we have, leave it to a worship guy to want to think of a bit of rhythm, but I think of a clock ticking each second. So whether you get that in your head, or whether you snap along with me, or whether or not we sit here in silence in the room, that's fine. Just think of the silence of a clock ticking. And if you were to ask, how many people die on an average day? You get different answers. I could poll every one of you, and you might say 1,000, 2,000. The truth of the matter is, there's about 150,000 people that'll die in a given day. It's about 1.8 seconds, 1.8 people every second. We've got statistics that will tell us that out of professions of faith that were given to loved ones or records that were on file, and it's not accurate, but we know just basically that about 7% of those that die, 7% globally, profess salvation. Some scary statistics, 7%. that leaves 139,500 people each day to die without salvation. Every snap of my fingers, 1.6 people that die with no hope of salvation. That's scary. I'm going to tell you, as honestly as I can, complacency that kills us whenever we don't listen to that word, go into all the world and preach the gospel. Wouldn't you rather give thanks as you're going and share that with somebody? There is no plan B. You are plan A. As the worship team comes out, I want to invite you to get out that Connect card, and there's a few different items that are on there that you can feel free to check off if you're so led to. First one says that I want to commit this week to give thanks as I'm going by intentionally expressing gratitude to God exclusively for the first 30 minutes of my day. Just taking that time to say, I thank God for this, I thank God for that. Second, that I commit this week to give thanks as I'm going by refusing to let a moment to share the gospel with someone else pass me by. Don't just think about that person. Don't worry about what the outcome of that conversation that you have is. That's between them and God. Just take them to the door and teach them how to knock. I commit to give thanks this week by sending out at least 5 thank you cards to people this week that deserve gratitude. Just jot it down a simple note. Say, hey, I thank you for doing this. Man, if you're just a grouchy person by nature, that'll really just mess with their heads. And finally, if you've been hearing us talk today about salvation, and Jesus, and his gift, and what that means, and you're thinking, I really want to start a relationship with Jesus, we'd love to talk with you about that. Mark that down, and we'll certainly be in touch with you to be able to talk with that and begin to talk about that relationship. We're going to take one more act of worship, one final act of worship this morning, receive our tithes and offerings. And as the ushers prepare to come forward and the worship team prepares to play, we just want to prepare our hearts for that and just give one opportunity just to say thank you. Let's pray together. God, I thank you for this day. I thank you, as we say, for being able to wake up this morning with breath in our lungs that we don't deserve to have. So God, if we've started this day off without doing something that was amazing with that breath that you gave us, let us not exhale once more without first giving thanks for you and then continuing to give thanks with every breath we take. Thank you for the opportunity to pray without ceasing. We love you and we praise you. For it's in your Son's name we pray.